Over the years, I've wanted to do and try so many different things. I've tried learning a new language, I've tried to learn how to play guitar, and I failed at doing both. It took me many tries and many years before I finally developed a consistent workout routine that worked for me. I felt extremely frustrated that I couldn't stick with and learn the things that I truly felt interested in. If this sounds like you at all, I think I've found the book for you. Let me introduce you to Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's a book that's well known in the habit forming community. My name is Tyler Warlow, I go by the Mengineer, and today I'm going to be summarizing some of the key topics that James Clear discusses in his book. Let's jump into the video. If you're returning, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. So before I jump into the summary of the key points of this book, I want to talk a little bit about who this book is for and who this book is not for. I would definitely say that this book is for those who find themselves consistently frustrated with setting high and lofty goals and being unable to achieve them, as well as those who recognize the value of consistent effort over time. The book is very thoughtful in the sense that it gives a very structured framework for how to approach forming and breaking habits. It gives a very step-by-step process, offering summaries at the end of each chapter to help the reader fully grasp what the author is trying to convey. Now, what I will say, if you're a person who's looking for a quick fix or a hack, this book is not going to be for you. It really gives detailed information about how to make changes to your life as a whole and so that you can develop habits over time. Additionally, if you're looking for high-level theories or discussion on habits, this might not be the book for you. This book really gives more of a practical day-to-day usage of habit forming, so that way people can take this and apply it to their daily lives. So if you're looking for something that's more around the theoretical discussion about the best way to form habits or anything of a similar mindset, this really might not be the book for you. You might want to look into some other routes. With that being said, now that we've discussed who Atomic Habits might be for and who it might not be for, let's jump into the different sections of the books and some of the key points that James Clear makes. The book is divided into 6 main sections. They're not clearly labeled as 6 sections, but as you read the book, you'll find that there's kind of 6 areas that the book is divided into. The first part is the fundamentals of habit forming. And then the next 4 sections describe one of the things that James Clear mentions in the fundamentals, which are the 4 laws of habit change. And I will be delving a little bit into each of these sections, which the first law is make it obvious. The second law is make it attractive. The third law, make it easy. And finally, the 4th law, make it satisfying. And then finally, James Clear ends the book with a final section on advanced habit forming techniques. These will dive a little bit deeper past that habit formation to help find methods for people to make them stick, for those that struggle with motivation. Now, of course, we're going to dive into each of these sections into a little bit of greater detail, but I don't want to go too much because I, of course, want to leave the book open to y'all to read. So the first section of this book are the fundamentals. In this section, James Clear makes several really solid points about habit formation and the importance of starting small. Many people approach goal setting by setting these really high and lofty goals, and this also applies to the habits that they try to form. They kind of try to jump into the deep end, so to speak, and give this sink or swim mentality behind forming habits. James Clear makes the point that this is really not how you want to go about it. Instead, you want to aim to get 1% better every day. At first, your habits are going to be hard to form, so it's important to start small and start small changes. But as you start those small changes and you get a little bit better and a little bit better every day, it's like the effect of compounding interest, right? It's like when you put a little bit of money in an investment account to start, and over the years it grows into over $1 million. It's the same concept with your habit changes. Those small changes at the beginning will start a small change, and then over time you'll see drastic improvements. But they will be sustainable because you've taken the time to do small changes and then build those changes into your routines. He makes the point that this compounding effect can work both positively and negatively. So it is important to approach your habits and analyze which ones do you think are helping your life versus hurting your life. James Clear makes the argument that you should be focusing on your systems rather than your goals, because goals are a momentary change, but they don't lead to long-lasting effects. By making changes in your habits and your system, you'll make long-term changes towards the life that you want. He touches a little bit on the difference between outcome-based habits and identity-based habits, which, if you're interested in that, I would suggest buying the book and reading it. I'll list it in the description below. And then he, of course, talks about the cycle of habit formation, which is cue, craving, response, reward. Anyone who has watched my previous video on the power of habit will recognize this cycle as being very similar to that as described by Charles Duhigg. If you're interested in that video, it will be linked down in the description below. The book jumps into the second section, which is the first law of habit formation, which is stated simply as make it obvious. The author describes how habits become automatic over time due to certain cues. So the importance of forming new habits is that you want to make the cues for those habits as obvious as possible. So you need to bring your awareness to the cue. James Clear gives several exercises that you can do to practice this, such as pointing and calling, and then he provides this method called the Habit Scorecard, which you can be found on his website, and I will link down below. So you might be asking, what do I mean by make it obvious? If this is the first law, it needs to be discussed a little bit, right? Well, the author talks about how some of the most common cues are time and location. You start to feel tired at a certain time, or you start to feel excited when you're in a certain area. Those can invoke emotions in us that can lead us to start certain habits. We can practice making our habits more obvious using this method by specifically writing down our habits of, I will do X habit at this time. For me, one of the things that I do is I will go to the gym directly after work. Another thing that James Clear touches on is the concept of habit stacking. So let's say you already have an established habit, like making your coffee in the morning. You can do this thing called habit stacking, which is trying to form a new habit by tacking it on to this habit that you already have. One of the investors that I follow started a small stretching habit by attaching it to her coffee habit. So while her coffee was brewing, she would do a quick 5-minute stretching routine while waiting for her coffee instead of scrolling on her phone. Now, going into the location aspect of it a little bit deeper, your environment matters. Let's say you want to start a habit of exercising every day. You'll want to lay out your exercise clothes for you to immediately put on once you're out of bed. Let's say you want to start drinking more water. You would get a large, clear water bottle, maybe one with those little timestamps on it so you can see how far down the water has gone. But have that by you at all times. Seeing that water there will cue your brain to think, oh, I need to drink more water. The second section that James Clear talks about is the second law of habit formation, which is make it attractive. And there's a few key ways that he recommends doing this. He introduces a concept called temptation bundling. And with temptation bundling, you're pairing an action that you want to do with an action that you need to do. For example, when I was in high school, I used to play violin, and there would be times where I wanted to play video games or wanted to watch anime, and I really needed to practice a measure. So what I would do is I would set up the system where I would reward myself for doing what I needed to do. Once I practiced a measure and I got it correct 3 times in a row, for example, that's when I was allowed to go and watch an episode of anime or play a level of video games. Now, the importance with this is that you need to be disciplined about it. You need to hold yourself accountable to the amount of the reward that you're bundling with the thing that you need to do. He also recommends joining a group of people where the culture of what we want to achieve is what is normal. If you hang around with people that go against the things that you want to do, then it is going to be very difficult for yourself to motivate yourself to do those things. Because you're just going to have people around you at all times questioning, well, why are you doing this? We can go out and have fun, we can go out and do this. But if you have people around you where that is the normal, such as, say you join an investing group, they can encourage you to make the right decisions and show you the results of what it has led to for them over time, which can help motivate and encourage you to stick with the habits over the long haul. Finally, he recommends creating a motivation ritual, which is essentially right before you have to do something that is difficult for you, such as forming this new habit, you do something that you enjoy. For me, I would have a small smoothie right before my workout that I really enjoyed, and this helped kind of get me in the mood to keep going and work out and motivate me. Now, the third law that James Clear talks about is make it easy. You do this in several ways. The first being reducing the amount of friction. So in other words, removing obstacles from you doing the habit that you want to do. Second kind of goes back to a point that was mentioned earlier, which is priming your environment. So making your environment conducive to the habit that you want to form. So let's say you want to study more. You set up an environment that has no distractions. You only have, let's say, your work laptop and some headphones to help you listen to some music and stay distraction free. One of the things that James Clear suggests, especially when you're first starting out, is using something called the 2-minute rule, which is, let's say you take this habit that you want to do. You want to boil it down until it's something that you can do in 2 minutes and that you can consistently do in 2 minutes. He gives a couple examples of these, and I'll just go over one. He talks about trying to form the habit of becoming an early riser. That seems like a big change, right? You're going from your normal routine to waking up early in the morning. James argues breaking it down into much smaller and simpler tasks and being able to achieve each one before moving on to the next one. He breaks it down into 5 different steps. The first being, be home by 10 p.m. every night. Seems easy enough, right? The next phase, once you've achieved being able to be home by 10 p.m. every night, is having all your electronics turned off by 10 p.m. He's not even saying be in bed by 10 p.m. yet. The third phase is then being in bed by 10 p.m. The end goal is to be a morning riser, but only in the third step is he finally getting to the point of being in bed by 10 p.m. every night. He moves into step 4, which is having the lights turned off by 4 p.m. every night, and then the final phase is getting up by 6 a.m. every morning. So you can see he broke this down into small, approachable steps. Rather than just trying to jump into, I'm a morning person now, he broke it down into small, achievable steps that he was able to consistently achieve and then move forward and establish that greater overall habit. Finally, he discusses automating your habits. So let's say you're trying to track your exercises. Have an app that keeps track of that for you. Make it as easy as possible to automate the habits that you have. And finally, the fourth law that he talks about is make it satisfying. So one of the first things that he talks about is using reinforcement, which is similar in concept to one of the points that we discussed earlier of having something that you enjoy right before doing your habit. Reinforcement is kind of the opposite of that, of you are having something that you enjoy immediately after what you do. One of the things that I really enjoy doing with my fiance is we'll go to the gym, get back home, take a shower, and then sit down and watch an episode of something that we both enjoy. We give ourselves a small reward for being able to go to the gym and consistently stick with our schedule, and this helps motivate us. James Clear makes a really big point of using a habit tracker and sticking to something that I've brought up on the channel before, as mentioned by a YouTuber I follow called Matt Diavella, called the 2-day rule. And this is basically using your habit tracker to never miss more than 1 day. So in other words, you're tracking your habits. I find the simplest way to do that is to print off a blank calendar dedicated specifically to tracking the habit that you want. And every day that you do the habit, you put an X on that calendar. And when you don't do that habit, you leave it blank. Now, what that 2-day rule is entailing is that you don't want to have 2 blanks in a row. You only ever want to have 1 blank, because you want to make sure that you're consistently doing that habit. By having that habit tracker and being able to visually see what you've been doing, you aren't lying to yourself about the progress that you've been making on your habits. And it can really serve as a flame to the fire to help motivate you to consistently stick with your routine. And finally, we're going to be jumping into a brief summary of the advanced tactics that James Clear covers. One of the things that James Clear mentions as one of the biggest obstacles for people in forming habits is boredom. It's as simple as that. As you become better and better at the habits that you're forming, things start to become more automatic. And this starts to kind of have a negative effect in the sense of the more automatic a behavior is, the more boring it is, and the less attention that we give it. And so habits start to kind of slip a little. We're not as accurate as we used to be because we know how to do the process, so we just assume we're doing it right. To counteract this, it's important to reevaluate and reestablish the habits that you've set over the year. James Clear himself says that he does it twice a year, where he analyzes his habits and the goals that he had and makes adjustments accordingly. The additional concept that he talks about is something called the Goldilocks zone. You want to find this perfect spot where you're feeling just challenged enough, but not too challenged to make you give up. If you're not challenged enough, you're going to grow bored with the process and potentially stop doing it. Versus if you're too challenged, it's going to be too difficult for you to see any tangible progress on it, which could lead to you giving up and quitting. All right, everyone, and there you have it. That is my summary of Atomic Habits by James Clear. This was, of course, just a summary of his work. I would highly recommend buying the actual book. It offers a lot more insights and examples, as well as offers really good graphics, diagrams, and an end of chapter summary for each of the topics that he discusses. It's really good for reinforcing that information in your brain. This book builds off a lot of the concepts that were discussed in a previous video of mine where I summarized the book, The Power of Habit. If you're interested in checking out that video, I will have that at the end of the video as well as linked down in the description below. If you would like to buy the book, I will also have that linked in the description below. If you have any of your own suggestions or you want to discuss any of the topics that I brought up in today's video, please feel free to leave a comment down below. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. My most recent video can be found right here. And as always, this is the Mengineer, signing off.